11. Our book reviewer is Karen Dass in the Auckland studio. Hi, Karen.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. You have been reading a novel, Pentimento it is. This is by a local writer, Rosemary Wildblood.
Yes, and I have to say that when it showed up in my letterbox, I thought, gee whiz, what an absolutely ghastly cover. It's an ugly lurid purple.
Hadn't thought about that, but we do judge books by their covers in the first instance. Hopefully we persevere.
And as for the name, Pentimento, it's a little bit pretentious. Nobody's going to remember the name. It'll sort of forever be known as the book with the hideous purple cover. But I rather enjoyed this book.
That's the main thing. Where are we and with whom?
So briefly, it's about two artists and a musician in New Zealand. Begins in Christchurch in the early 90s, and it moves through Auckland, the 2000s, and goes on to New York and back again. And it's about three characters, Serena, Cliff, and Doyle. Serena's really headstrong, really haughty. She's a musician in an orchestra. She's very chilly and frosty, very confident. And of course she's very talented and beautiful, but troubled. And Cliff is tall, chiselled, handsome artist. And his friend Doyle, who's actually, I have to say, was a bit of a pale character.
In what way?
Well, the funny thing is, Serena says at one point, she says something like, Cliff and Doyle were like two halves of a well-rounded human being. So it's almost like Doyle is in the shadow of Cliff a little bit.
Okay, so you are, as a reader, are you finding it not convincing because of this, or?
It took a while for me to warm to these characters, but I actually found the main thing about this book is that technically Wildblood is a really good writer. She's really confident. Her turns of phrase are really nice. Each sentence is actually really reasonably well considered, and it's quite a nice read. I mean, usually when you're dealing with sort of bohemian culture and arts and music and fiction, it can be pretty cheesy and make you wince a little bit. But to be fair, I didn't find that with this book.
She brings into it a piece of contemporary, hardly history yet, isn't it? She brings in the events of the earthquake. Yes,
and that sort of acts as a catalyst for people to sort of reassess their lives and sort of face their pasts and past events.
This brings us to the meaning of the word pentimento, which is a particular term, yeah?
Yeah, she helpfully describes it at the beginning. She explains that it actually means the phenomenon of earlier paintings showing through a layer or layers of paint on a canvas, and it's Italian, so I guess it's a bit of a heavy-handed metaphor, and it sort of refers to, you know, the layers of all these personalities.
Does it come to something of a crisis point, or something that you can really find yourself being confronted by the extremes, to the extent these characters have extremes to their personalities?
Yes, and again, the catalyst of, you know, the event that happens, the earthquake, that really does force people to, all the dynamics are pushed to the surface.
Overall, strengths and weaknesses, you seem to be reasonably pleased with this, with the writing itself?
The writing was actually really good, and the thing about Rosemary Wildblood is that she has a background, I think, working for Creative New Zealand or the Arts Council, and she sits on literary bodies and boards, so perhaps she's had a career of actually helping other people refine their writing, and so she's probably quite good at that. But one thing about it was that I found how precisely it's written to actually be a bit suffocating. There was no room to breathe because it was all so immaculate.
You'd have liked a few pockmarks.
Maybe, yeah.
And the other thing I seem to be taking from you is perhaps the characters you couldn't quite connect with to the extent you'd like to.
I couldn't quite connect with Doyle, perhaps. Although Serena, she could have been a cliche of a character, you know, the troubled, beautiful artist. But I still wanted to know what happened to her. She doesn't, yeah. And Cliff, he grows as a character, so that made it a lot more engaging for me.
Overall, what level of recommendation would you give?
There's nothing wrong with this book. I rather enjoyed it. It's a nice book. It's an easy read. Yeah.
And it's New Zealand content, which is always something else to take into account as well, writing about New Zealanders and New Zealand situations.
Yeah, there's recognisable places, and it does feel like a New Zealand book.
Thank you, Karen. Karen Dass has been reading Pentimento. It's by Rosemary Wildblood. Wiley Publications Limited are the publishers, and $29.99 the price. 18 minutes away from